How is everyone doing? Is myself, Jeff Black. I have Brandon DeCruz over across me, looking beautiful as always. We are Chasing Clarity Health and Fitness Podcast, and today, episode 59, factors that impact scale weight fluctuations and how to shift your mindset on weigh-ins. Oh man, this is going to be a topic. I have this conversation at least once a day with someone who emails me pissed about the scale. And I'm like, man, if I could magically put 3 pounds of body fat on in 24 hours, the best part is I'd be a billionaire because I could help you get those back off in a day if that was the case. But nonetheless, this is going to be a great conversation. It's based upon a lot of feedback that Brandon and I have gotten based upon past episodes. But that being said, B, let's get into your last 7 days. How's your last 7 days been?
Man, my week has been great, man. Last 7 days have been very productive in terms of client onboardings, a lot of consultation calls, and really, it's funny because I almost feel like the more that I speak with other coaches, the more things I see them dipping their hands in. So they're trying to do this and they're doing that, and they're all over the place. They're getting a supplement company, or they're investing into this thing, or they're doing a business mentorship and all these masterminds and things. And that's all good and well. I'm very supportive of that. But really, I'm actually taking an opposite direction or an opposite approach. I'm really just doubling down and focusing on my strengths. And that's coaching, and that's consultation calls, and really just focusing on those I serve. And that's really where my intentions and my focus will be going, will be, placed on going forward. But besides that, and this is part of the coaching, and this is something I expanded upon last week in terms of how I educate my own clients, how I educate others. And really that comes down to three methods. I'm educating myself first and foremost through both in the trenches experience, as well as reading research and doing my own continue education courses and things of that sort. But also a big component of this is my day-to-day interactions with clients, as well as the podcast that I follow up with. So this past week, it was a jam-packed week in terms of podcasts. So I had the good, I had the pleasure of joining two guys that we know. Actually, you were on their show recently, and it's the guys, Aram, which is 4 weeks to the beach. Anyone that knows him on Instagram has a great page. And then Jimmy Nutrition, and I joined them on the Other Side Lifestyle podcast. And we initially had one topic planned to speak about, and just like off the cuff, we were having a conversation just leading in and really getting to know each other, besides just the interactions we've had on social media. And Aram at one point was like, dude, let's talk about this. So we just talked about how to get the most out of your coaching. So it kind of was like a follow-up to the episode that you and I recorded last week, which was very timely in and of itself. So guys, if you're a fan of this podcast, I definitely suggest you guys go check them out over there. There's an episode with me that just aired this past week, and then there's also an episode with Jeff. So I think you'll get utility out of both. And then besides that, I was on Jeremiah Bayer's podcast, Living Lean podcast. So it's been, a week of podcasting, a week of, just in the trenches work. And besides that, man, everything else in life is going well. The sun is shining, life is good. And, I'm looking forward to another great episode, especially this one in particular, because this is a conversation that I literally have on a daily basis. It's something I get questions about from clients. It's something that it's a bone of contention with certain clients. And so I'm looking forward to expanding upon that and really being able to elucidate and elaborate on a lot of the reasons why we see scale weight fluctuations and how to detach ourselves from that number being a value judgment, because it's anything but that. But besides that, man, how was your last 7 days, and catch us up on your week?
Oh, man, my last 7 days have been good. I've been signing some clients. I'm starting to increase my threshold of what I can handle. So I brought a few extra on, more than I normally do. And I've been managing it really well. I've gotten really good about being off my phone starting Friday night about 5 o'clock
Mhm.
all the way through until Monday morning.
Do you mind expanding upon that, like how you're being able to increase your threshold for clients? Because this is something that you and I have had conversations with, as well as I'm sure those in the audience would be interested.
Just understanding, mastering my time and my energies, meaning taking like Jamie Filer, had a conversation with her. She takes like little mini breaks during the day. And
Mhm.
so what I've been doing is allowing myself to say from noon till 3 o'clock, go off my phone.
Oh, very
And
nice.
I'll just like stretch, I'll write, I'll do ice therapy, whatever I want to do, sit out in the sun, and take a little time to myself and just completely reconnect. So that way I feel like I have time to myself again, because other people are demanding it. And plus, it also resets your fuse for the day. Anyone who's an honest coach could tell you that the more questions the pile at you during the day, the more annoyed you get, especially if they're all the same and you've helped clients before in the past on the same topics, right?
Absolutely.
So I've just found that this helps me kind of just get back to center. And I have a PM shift. Most people don't realize I carry a high client load because I do a lot of in person too.
Mhm.
So, I got to be charged up ready for them. And that's just something I've done to increase my capacity, which was create more time for myself to allow more capacity to be on. So I kind of went at it differently than I normally had. But other than that, my book comes out in October. It's a done deal.
Let's go, dude.
Yeah. So thank
Congratulations.
you.
That's phenomenal. I cannot
Yeah.
wait. I better, first and foremost, I'm saying this on the air so that every listener can hear this and you validate this. I better get a signed copy ASAP.
You will. Come
I'll
on.
pre-order whatever it takes, but I'm looking forward to that, man. That's a massive accomplishment. I'm really looking forward to not only reading it myself, but also being able to see, this dream of yours come to fruition because it's a lot of work. And obviously, we've had many conversations both on the podcast and off the podcast about this. So I'm psyched for you.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. I have enjoyed my ride of the experience, and I've enjoyed starting writing another book. It's been different. I gave myself 2 years on this one, but a buddy of mine now, he wants to um, write a history book with me. And I'm like, shit. All right. I guess we're doing it. So anyway,
Now, let me ask you: is
yeah,
that book number two? Is that book number
that'll be
three?
number three.
Oh wow! All right. So we're about to get number one out this fall, and then two more to follow.
Well, we said we would do like 3 years for the history book because we want to do something like really. I'm a big history nerd. Most people probably don't know that about me. And we wanted to just like write like about like some of these like crazy shipwreck pirate things that have happened at sea that are these, just totally out there stories that are wild as hell that you don't really know in history. Is what we were wanting to write about. So we don't know if we want to write about one or multiple, like maybe history's most savage shipwrecks, and piracy and stuff like that. Because some of the stories are wild that we've read. So anyway, and then I've got my daily devotional thing I'm working on. So that's been cool. Let's get into this, B man. Uh Factors, the impact scale wave fluctuations, how they shift your mindset weigh-ins. Every week, if you're a coach, every week, if you're a client, you're dealing with the fucking scale. The only thing that it matters for is your relationship to gravity if you jump out from a 3-story building. Otherwise, no one really gives a shit what you weigh. Hey, we play the game. This is the one that causes the most friction with coaches and clients. This is the one that causes the most frictions for clients. This is the one that causes most friction for coaches. It's literally like each one gets their own hell, and then combined, it's like the ninth level of Dante's hell, when you're like
Dante's
on this.
Inferno out here.
Yeah, when you're on this topic. So we thought we would kind of start addressing this. Like, what is some things you do? And I have to like really work with people on this. And it's not, I personally tell people to weigh in daily because I think you could get detached from the scale faster. I've seen that happen with more women. A lot of women will argue with me, but I'm like, I've seen it because it's just work. But we're going to get into some of these nuances on how we coach mindset. Brandon's got some cool research with some of his own experience as well. But let's talk about the first one, the common thoughts and fears around the scale. I know the biggest one is when someone goes up 3 pounds that they just overnight that they just lost it all. And I'm like, what? That's not. Ugh. So let's get into that, B. What are some common thoughts and fears around the scale?
All right. So to start off, I think the scale is something many of us have struggled with at some point in our lives, especially if you are someone that's very fitness orientated or your physique focused. It's something we've all dealt with. And this is often an issue that is primarily thought to just affect women. But in reality, I myself, I'll be honest about it, I myself have struggled with the scale, especially early on in my fitness career and in my fitness journey. And I've worked with countless other men who have too. However, this is something many men don't speak about, which is why I think it's important, first and foremost, to do so. So I want everyone to realize we're all in the same boat. We've all dealt with this. So you're not alone. It's not just a female specific issue, but I believe one of the reasons why weighing in and scale weight has become an issue for many, probably the majority of us, is because many of us grew up that thinking the scale was the be all end all marker of progress. And if you look back at our generations, many of us grew up in a household where many of our like mothers or our siblings, sisters, things of that sort, were very scale and weight conscious. And they did things, say, like Weight Watchers was extremely prominent when I was growing up. And the emphasis, especially prior to the last decade or so, where resistance training and building muscle has become a more common goal, was to chase scale weight loss rather than body composition change. So, scale weight is a tracking metric, which I find many clients and individuals become hyper focused and fixated on. And scale weight is by no means the be all, end all metric, which should be focused on solely when looking to assess progress. However, changes in weight over time is a good indicator as to how your body is responding to your daily, calorie intake from an energy balance perspective. And often I hear individuals discussing their goal weight when it comes to a fat loss phase, which is what reinforces this attachment to the scale, where essentially we see people that pretty much like a good way to put it is they live or die by the reading they see on a daily basis. And this is a habit and a component of a transformation journey, which I encourage, my clients to try to divorce themselves from, as we should be chasing a goal look and physique, not a goal weight. However, this doesn't mean that the scale shouldn't be used throughout the process, as it's a tool, and as with every tool, it serves a purpose. So the first, way to solve any issue, including being fixated on your scale weight or being fearful of the scale and trying to avoid weighing in, is to acknowledge it and be aware of it. And then from there, if you're able to learn more about it, it'll increase your understanding of what's truly going on and help you understand how to use it in a right manner, which is to provide you with data, not an evaluation of your self worth. So, in today's episode, we're going to cover all things scale weight related and weigh ins to help you guys understand what the scale is useful for, how to use the scale for the most accurate data, and really how to use it, the factors. And this is really going to be extensive because I've went through every factor we could think of because I have these conversations on a daily basis, and I'm sure you can expand upon them as well, Jeff. But the
Mhm.
factors that influence our scale weight fluctuations, as well as the research on the benefits of more frequent and consistent weigh-ins. So, Jeff, you ready to dig into this one?
I'm all for it, bro. Let's get into it. What is the scale useful for? I personally think it's a great way to understand the trends over time, along with other factors, bowel movements, hydrational issues. Most importantly, helping people understand they can't put 3 pounds of fat on overnight. Is to do it. But let's get into that, man. Like, what are like some other real things people that they need to like understand about why the scale is useful for?
All right, so first and foremost, let's just, define what the scale weight is essentially, because a lot of people look at scale weight in like almost like this very subjective manner. But if we look at it objectively, your scale weight, all it shows is our relationship with gravity. However, it is a piece of data that can tell us a few important pieces of information. So using the scale to consistently weigh yourself can be a useful tool to track data over time, including to find out our status of energy balance. And this is because changes in scale weight can be used as a proxy for changes in our calorie intake or to determine what state of energy balance you're currently in. So for example, if your weight is trending up over time, longer time scale, say weeks or months, it's an indicator that you're currently in an energy surplus. Whereas if your weight is trending down over time, it's an indicator that you're in an energy deficit. And if your weight is consistently staying around the same number over time, it's an indication that you're at energy balance, aka you're at maintenance. But it's important to note that just like our maintenance calorie intake is a moving target that can change from day to day based on our activity levels, our lifestyle, and a host of other factors, our maintenance number or our maintenance weight is not a static exact number. And it's really important to highlight this. This is a conversation I've so often with clientele because, we have to realize that fluctuations in weight are normal and are a part of the maintenance process. And most of the literature, if you actually look into what weight maintenance is defined by, you know, in most of the literature, it's actually defined, or when they look at long-term weight maintenance, is a weight change of less than 3% of body weight from baseline. So if your baseline weight, say, is 150 pounds, that means that if you're one day of the week or several days of the week at 154.5, that's actually within your maintenance weight. And it's really important to realize this because sometimes, like Jeff, you had just mentioned 3 pounds, like someone gained 3 pounds overnight, and
Mhm.
they think that they've just blown it. Now they're in this massive surplus, or they think that they've gained a bunch of fat or they're beyond their maintenance, weight threshold. And really that's not the case. These are normal fluctuations, which we'll get into later throughout the podcast. However, another reason the scale is a useful tool is because these are a cheap and convenient method to utilize, and it's also something that it's easy for all of our clients to access, regardless of where they're located. So, I work with a large, client base that's international. So, there's certain, say that I was using DEXA or I was using, certain methods of tracking body composition progress. A lot of them wouldn't have access to these in different, whether it be from a financial budgeting perspective or also a location perspective. And it's also one of the easiest metrics for a client to use and one that can be easily standardized, meaning I can get, we can get clients to take this measurement in a similar fashion consistently across the course of either a fat loss phase or a muscle building phase. So I kind of see it as like a low barrier of entry item that we can use to track data over time. The scale is also a great awareness tool, and it can help us become, increase awareness of the day to day fluctuations in our weight and how normal these fluctuations are, which can help us remove the emotion from it. And because we're going to realize that weight doesn't linearly go down, and we can realize it's just a piece of data and it doesn't define our worth. And I find that, you hit on this yourself, Jeff, but I find, with my own clients that frequent weigh-ins is especially helpful. And, this is really the case, especially with my female clients, as it helps them understand and find trends and patterns in their scale weight across the menstrual cycle. And it also gets them to realize or to know when to expect spikes in their weight, even if they're nailing the plan, as these are natural increases in water retention that occur due to hormonal changes across the menstrual cycle. It can also be used as an accountability tool. So, for example, if you're in a fat loss phase and have been getting looser with your food tracking or even incorporating some free meals, like you're just getting looser with the diet, and in the back of your head, like you're kind of like blocking it out, you're digging your head in the sand and not really, counting your macros or counting your calories and thinking, yeah, I'm in a deficit, but really you're mentally in a deficit, not physiologically in a deficit. And you're including these free meals or these treats into your diet. Using the scale is a good way to see how these increases in calories are affecting your rate of fat loss, and can help you see that not tracking accurately and going over your calorie intake consistently is resulting in a slower rate of loss, or is keeping you stagnant. So it's keeping you at maintenance calories because you're no longer in a deficit. And this can help you course correct and get back on track if fat loss is truly your goal. And I also think, and you actually hit on this, and this is something I always use this terminology with clients. And I think that the scale is a good form of exposure therapy, which is something that's actually reinforced by the literature. So instead of avoiding something you dislike or that makes you uncomfortable, expose yourself to it to gain awareness of it, and you'll become more and more comfortable with it over time. But just like the scale has its uses, there are also some other, things that it's not useful for. And we have to realize that. So your scale weight doesn't indicate your muscle mass or your fat mass. So although I use body weight tracking with clients, it's important to realize that the scale only directly measures our body mass and doesn't differentiate between how much of our weight is from muscle mass, from fat tissue, from water and glycogen content, or even gut content or stomach content from our previous day's food intake. And the scale on your weight also does not define, I really want to elucidate this, it doesn't define your worth. It doesn't define who you are, but it is a piece of data that's useful to track, just like other pieces of numerical data and stats that we track in our daily lives. So, just to give you guys a couple of analogies and a couple of examples of this, we're not defined by how much weight we lift in the gym, but we still track our lifts in order to note our progression in the gym and to ensure that we're pushing ourselves in our training sessions across the course of a training block. We're also not defined by the amount of money in our bank account, but we still track our income,
Mhm.
to know if we're making progress towards the specific financial goals that we've set in terms of meeting our weekly and monthly expenses and our savings. And these are all examples of numbers that don't define us, but they are useful and helpful to track to check if we're heading in the right direction. If what we're doing is working or needs to be adjusted, and if we're getting closer to our goals that we have set for ourselves. So ultimately, the scale is a useful tracking metric, as without data, we are blind and we can't manage or improve what we don't measure and monitor. And so this is why this is a huge component of, using scale weight and using it for what it's designed for, and not getting emotionally attached to a number that you see, and rather just realizing, hey, it's just another piece of data, just like your calories, just like your macros are,
Mhm.
and let's use it for what it's best, use it for something of its greatest utility.
I agree with that. I also think when it comes to the scale, if people just understand, like going into it, that it's going to be different every day, it's almost like a surprise. Even going into a show, it's different a little bit all the time. I've just seen that
And
myself,
that's
right?
when you're at your most consistent. That
Yes,
is when
that's
we're
when
nailing
everything's
things spot
drilling
on.
it. Yeah. Down to I know I'm gonna pee exactly at 12:07 today. You know what I mean? Like you just know stuff like that. So I think that that's where I always tell people, like, look, the scale's designed to move. What we're paying attention to is trends along with other things.
100%.
How to use the scale for the most accurate data though? Like in terms, I guess, nutritionally, workout wise, you kind of able to program it that way. So let's get into some of that real quick.
Yeah. So what I see is that the scale is often a misused tool when it comes to the body composition improvement progress. And this causes a lot of people or a lot of individuals to say, just throw away the scale. Like I see this post on in social media all the time where they're like, throw away the scale, detach yourself from the scale. I'm totally with the detaching part, but throwing away the scale and never getting on it is not a great solution unless you are someone that deals with body image issues, like actually psychologically diagnosed issues, maybe a passive and eating disorder. I will, open up on the fact that I don't make every, I don't, require all of my clients to, utilize a scale on a daily basis, but I do, for the vast majority, I do have them do so. And it's only if it's a specific context or a specific situation that warrants not utilizing the scale. But a lot of the times when people do those, Instagram reels or whatever it may be, and they're throwing out their scale, they're breaking their scale, and they're doing all this dramatic stuff, they're essentially disregarding the data that it can provide us with. And really, when we look at it, success leaves clues, and we have multiple systematic reviews looking at self weighing for weight loss and weight loss management, which have found that regular self weighing seems to be a good predictor of weight loss. It's a good predictor of better weight loss maintenance and shows a lower likelihood of weight regain. Now, we don't have to, we don't want to use the scale to chase a certain body weight, as aiming for a specific body weight doesn't mean you'll look the way you want to. And we see that all the time. I've often gotten the feedback from a new client that I said, listen, I dieted down. I thought I was going to be at my best look, or, I was aiming for 125 pounds, in their mind, or 130 pounds. This often is like the number with females. Like they want this specific number, but I got there and I didn't look the way that I wanted to. And they get in this loop of just chronic dieting, trying to get lighter and lighter, not realizing that really the physique that they were looking for required more muscle, and it was going to be a heavier scale weight than what they initially intended. So I always try to get that across to clients. We're not chasing a specific body weight unless you are someone that's competitive or something. And the only time I'll target a specific body weight is when I have a physique competitor who needs to make a weight class. So for in your example, Jeff, like you need to hit a weight class. So that
Mhm.
makes sense that we're looking to hit a specific weight on a target date, because that's what's required to compete. However, with the majority of my clients, I'm having them pursue physique progress and improvements in their body composition, as that's their ultimate goal. Like they're aiming for a look, it's not for a goal weight in and of itself. And so many times, when someone has a fear of stepping on the scale, they'll do it less often as a result. However, this leads to many issues because if you know, essentially what you're doing is you're getting less accurate data because it leads you to be more predisposed to seeing larger fluctuations. So, for example, say that you only step on the scale once per week. One week, you may step on the scale on a morning where you had a great night of sleep, you have low stress, and you have a low weigh-in day. So you feel like it's a victory. You celebrate that. However, the next week, you may step on the scale when you've had a spike in weight, which you didn't realize. You only realize it when you step on the scale that one particular day. But because you only weigh in once per week, you're unaware of your weekly average or your daily average across the week. So now you see this spike up in weight of 3 to 4 pounds as compared to the previous week. And you think that all the hard work that you put in throughout the course of the week was for nothing. So you get discouraged, you may veer off your diet, you feel disinhibited. And there's all these downstream effects that could take place as a result of just not getting accurate data. And also, if you're only weighing in once per week to avoid it, you're putting way more pressure on a once weekly weigh in as the be all end all weigh in evaluation. And that's actually the opposite of what we want to do. So, we want to use a scale in a way that provides us with the most accurate data possible. And in order to do this, we want to take weigh ins on a frequent basis. So, generally, I like to have clients do this daily. But for those who can't do it daily, I recommend taking a weigh in between 4 and 7 times a week. So, the majority of the week, we're still getting a weigh in, we're still getting an average. And you want to do this in a consistent fashion, meaning you take in the morning upon waking around the same time each day after emptying your bladder or having a bowel movement. So you want that consistently done. And you want to take these weigh ins in similar conditions, meaning either nude or in your underwear, to ensure that changes in clothing don't affect your day to day scale weight. You also want to make sure that the scale is located on a flat, balanced surface, because even just being off kilter can, drastically alter your weigh ins. And you want to use the same scale on a daily basis. So, really, when I get down to this, like a lot of times I'll have clients traveling for a vacation or something. And I really tell them, if you're traveling or you're on vacation and don't have access to a scale that you know is precise and calibrated, keep in mind that it may give you different readings than the scale that you use at home, because it's obviously a different metric. So, after taking your scale weight, note down the number on a note in your phone, or you can use an app. I have a lot of clients use an app called Happy Scale. And then what we want to do is we want to take an average of those weights across the week, and that will give you your daily average weigh in. Then you take that week's average and compare it over subsequent weeks. And this method helps to smooth out weigh ins that may have been impacted or influenced by many extraneous variables. Also, don't let the scale get to you, and do not overthink any single daily weigh in. I really have to get that across. I speak to this with clients all the time. This is just a fluctuation, and try to just use it as a piece of data. Weigh in daily and realize it's normal to see fluctuations day to day, and keep in mind that we're looking for trends over time. And now that's how you use, that's basically how we get the most accurate data. However, I do have, my females do this in a slightly different manner. And I'm going to let you open up about this as well, Jeff, because you may do it differently than myself. For my female clients, I actually find it more effective to compare weekly averages between points in the cycle. So instead of focusing on comparing week 1 to week 2, what I like to do is I'll pay more attention to week 1 of this month's cycle and then compare it to week 1 of the next month's cycle, especially within a fat loss phase, because I really want to compare more, you know, more set and standardized weeks within the menstrual cycle. And this is more effective as many females experience significant water retention in different time periods across the cycle, especially in the late luteal phase. So when you're about to you're experiencing PMS symptoms right before menses, that's when you're generally going to see your largest fluctuations in scale weight. And so that's something I like to do personally with clients. And really, when I'm monitoring a client's progress, if they're not moving, say a female in a fat loss phase, she didn't, I'm not seeing weight drop off from week 3 of the cycle to week 4 when they're hitting that late luteal phase, and I actually see weight come up. I know that it's most likely due, especially if they're consistent and they're on point. I know that it's due just to water fluctuations, due to hormonal concentrations changing, as well as the bloating and the discomfort that they're in, the higher stress that occurs during PMS. And so I just kind of give them a reminder, like, listen, we're throwing out that data this week, don't worry about it. But and sometimes what I'll also do is I'll say, listen, let's compare this point in the cycle, so this month compared to last month. And we've been in fat loss phase the last 2 months, so this point in your cycle, it's the late luteal phase. Yes, your weight is up a couple pounds, however, you're still a couple pounds lighter than you were at this point in the late luteal phase last cycle. And so that shows a comparison and shows progress. And the one caveat I do want to make is how to not use the scale, which is to compare it one day to the next or one day to another, as there are so many things that influence our scale weight that many don't realize how normal it is to see day-to-day fluctuations. So we never want to get caught up on just one singular number, and we really want to use this in a very objective manner where we're comparing trends and monitoring trends over time.
I think with women, the scale tends to be something you have to look at over longer views than you do men. Meaning, like within about 2 weeks with a guy, you can kind of know if it's going right or wrong, and kind of sniff it out. With women, there's so many hormones, there's so many other things in play that you kind of have to look at 30-day windows, like you're saying. You have to go back to time periods before. And it's very difficult to remind someone who's just everything's coming at them at 110 miles an hour to slow down and breathe and look back 30 days. Do you know what I mean? It's so hard to pull someone to that moment there because you're trying to yank them back and forth. So I think that what you brought up were some good points. I think that it's the idea of looking at trends over time. That's why I like blood glucose, during women's luteal phases, things like that. Hey, you get a real good chance. I've actually recommended a CGM monitor at this point because it's been neat to see how every woman's a little different from themselves. And I have had some interesting things I played around with that. So some women actually do better. You know how they tend to be more insulin resistant in the luteal phase?
Yeah, if we're talking generality, we'll see greater insulin sensitivity during the follicular phase, so the first, say, 2 weeks or so of the cycle, and then we'll see a decrement in insulin sensitivity towards the late luteal phase. But honestly, I haven't seen that with everyone.
Hey, Keegan's school calling real quick, so I'm going to move on to factors that influence our scale weight fluctuations real quickly. You handle that.
No worries.
Live moments, people.
All right. So, one of the most common mistakes many make within their fitness journey is to become so attached to their scale weight that they neglect to acknowledge the many factors that could be influencing the day to day reading they're seeing. So, the first factor that can impact our scale weight readings and fluctuations we see is stress. So, stress can cause elevations in cortisol, which increases the amount of water you hold and retain. And this is due to the fact that cortisol interacts with the receptors for aldosterone, which impact water retention, as aldosterone is a hormone that influences both water and electrolyte balance and tells our body how much water to keep or to excrete. So, all forms of stress can impact our scale weight, whether that be psychological, emotional, or physical stress, like dieting. So, one of the many things we see in dieting conditions is that being in a deficit causes a skewing in our hormone levels. And one of the most common hormonal adaptations, and this is something that I've opened up about many times on the podcast that we've done on metabolic adaptation and adaptive thermogenesis and many of those type of podcasts, is we experience an increase in catabolic hormones like cortisol. And the relationship between dieting, increased cortisol, and water retention is something that we've seen in research dating back to the Minnesota semi-starvation study, which took place in the 1940s, which is another study that we've covered in length because it's a really good controlled study in a metabolic ward, essentially, where they really look at the severity or the hormonal adaptations, the physiological adaptations to a chronic or elongated period of being in an energy deficit. And at one point in the study, many of the male participants stopped losing weight despite being in a 50% calorie deficit that was controlled by the researchers. And this was due to the increase in water retention that these participants were experiencing. So oftentimes, this water retention may look like a stalling in fat and weight loss. However, once this extra water retention has dissipated, you will see a reduction in scale weight as long as the deficit has been maintained. And this is something I really pay a close attention to with clients who are in a fat loss phase, as there are certain points within a diet where, despite following the program to a T, and anyone out there that's dieted has been in this situation where you've really been nailing everything, and you know that you're in a calorie deficit, both from an energy intake and an energy expenditure perspective. So you're nailing the diet, you're tracking your macros, you're hitting all your targets, and you're hitting your steps, your training, your cardio, everything. However, their weight and fat loss has seemed to plateau, and that's merely due to stress. And the next factor that can influence the fluctuations we see in our scale weight is our hydration status. So your weight can be drastically influenced by how hydrated you are. So fluctuations in your fluid intake can result in massive fluctuations in your scale weight. And this is because muscle is predominantly water. So if we actually look at muscle tissue, it's made up of about 75% of water. So a fuller muscle is going to also be holding more water. And muscle isn't the only tissue that holds and stores water. We actually see a small percentage, about 10% of water is stored in fat. And so if you're dehydrated, it's going to reflect in a lower weight. So anyone out there, you've been on a bender the night before, you had some alcoholic beverages, you see that your scale weight's lighter, you've been dehydrated over the night, or if you just didn't drink enough. However, if you've just consumed a ton of liquids, it'll reflect in a higher weight. But these are just transient changes in water balance that do not indicate whether you've lost or gained fat. Now, the next factor that influences our day to day scale weight fluctuations is our sodium intake. So, sodium has a ton of benefits to performance and recovery. However, it's known to increase water retention as sodium pulls water into tissues, so increases in sodium can impact scale weight. And this is why it's important to realize that if you went from a state where you weren't taking in adequate amounts of salt and have now added it in, whether that be through condiments or added salt or even the changes in your nutritional intake, like say you start eating processed foods, you may see an increase in your scale weight until your body readjusts water balance. And also, when we actually look at the majority of sodium intake in the American diet, it's from processed foods. So if you're constantly fitting processed foods or packaged items into your diet, it's like, trying to really be flexible, utilizing flexible dieting, or if it fits your macros, it'll increase your sodium intake and can increase scale weight as a result. Another factor that heavily influences, and we're really going to dive into this one because this is a conversation I constantly have, but another factor that heavily influences our fluctuations that we see in our scale weight day to day is our carbohydrate intake and glycogen levels. So when we consume carbs, our muscles and liver store those carbs as a fuel source called glycogen. And when we look at glycogen, like from a molecular standpoint, glycogen is made up of 1 part glucose and 3 to 4 parts water. So for every gram of glucose stored as glycogen, we store about 3 to 4 grams of water. Now, the thing is, we have the capacity to store quite a bit of carbohydrates as glycogen. So this comes with a ton of water, which can influence our scale weight. So, for example, like if you actually look, and this is something I've dug into, but if you look into the research on glycogen storage, even in an average male, this is without training. So keep in mind that training, because muscle is a sink for glucose. If you're more muscular, you're going to be able to store a lot more than this. But in average studies, we see that an 80 kilogram or 176-pound individual can store between 4 to 800 grams of muscle glycogen and between 80 to 100 grams of liver glycogen. So, say we fall in the average of those numbers and can store 600 grams of muscle glycogen and 90 grams of liver glycogen. That's 690 grams of just stored glycogen, which comes out to 1.5 pounds that are on our body. However, we also have to keep in mind that we store 3 to 4 grams of water for every one of those 690 grams of glycogen. So if we add the average of 3.5 grams of water. So, we see that in average, 1 gram of glucose stores, or 1 gram of glycogen brings along with it 3 to 4 grams of water. We take an average, we get 3.5 grams of water to that 690 grams. We have another 5.3 pounds of water weight that can come along with the 1.5 pounds of glycogen. So in total, this can account to close to 7 pounds by itself. And the issue with this fact is that many people think they've gained fat after reintroducing carbs, even if they're in a deficit or they're at maintenance, because of the increase in weight that we see from the water that's pulled along with restoring glycogen. Now, this brings us to our next reason for shifts in scale weight, which are dietary changes. So many of those who have tried a ketogenic diet or a low carb diet will notice a significant decrease in weight off the bat as a result of depleting their glycogen and lowering carbohydrate intake. But this is often misconstrued initially as fat loss, when in reality, water loss, especially in those beginning stages of fat loss, and especially going into a low carb phase and really depleting glycogen and lowering your carb intake, that's mostly water. So we're going to see water loss quicker than fat loss. But for every 1 gram of glycogen you lose, we got to keep in mind that you're also going to lose 3 to 4 grams of water, which can result in a few extra pounds of water loss in the first few weeks of a low carb diet. And the fact that water accompanies glycogen is important to remember, especially if you're shifting your diet, especially when it comes to reintroducing carbs. So if you're going from a low carbohydrate diet, and even if you're staying at meat and say you're doing an isocaloric diet, and you're taking it from where it was more predominantly like you were utilizing a lower carb, higher fat diet, and now you're just simply shifting your macro distribution. And now you're going to higher carb, lower fat. Well, you have to realize that when you're going to shift, it's going to be the same amount of calories. You're keeping yourself at energy balance, at maintenance calories. You're going to see a shift and an increase in scale weight just because you've increased your carbohydrate content and your glycogen storage. And that's in absence of any fat gain. So you've gained no fat. However, it's just the shifts in these substrates. And so to go along with the dietary changes, even just changes in food sources can lead to scale weight fluctuations due to changes in our gut content and in our inflammation, which also leads to water retention. So if your maintenance calorie intake is 2,000 calories and that keeps you at, say, 150 pounds, you can literally shift your scale weight by eating foods that inflame you, despite keeping calories exactly the same. So, for example, I'll give you a case of my own. Generally, like my maintenance calorie intake is around 3,500 calories. However, 3,500 calories coming from what I usually eat, which are lean protein sources and whole food carbs, and quality fat sources prepared at home is much different than 3,500 calories of processed and packaged items like chips or burgers and fries from a fast food joint. Because, and I'll tell you personally, like when I have those type of items, generally, it leaves me inflamed and retaining more water due to the much higher level of sodium in these items, and then also just the inflammatory effect that I get from these foods. And so besides those things, another factor that influences the fluctuations we see in scale weight is our stomach content and gut residue, which essentially refers to the amount of undigested material that's in your gut, which can cause an increase in scale weight. And this is often the case when you've increased the volume of foods you're eating. You know, for example, like if you go into a dieting phase and you're someone that you've been in a mass, you've been in a surplus, you've been in a building phase, and you've been utilizing like say higher carb diet. However, you haven't been including, you're eating so much food that you're not including a lot of fruits and vegetables, or you're just someone that didn't incorporate that. And now you shift to a much more nutrient dense and low energy density diet, meaning you're incorporating more fruits and veggies, more fibrous food sources. And now you've increased your veggie, your fruit, and your fiber intake. That's going to temporarily increase your scale weight despite you not being in a surplus. So you went into a deficit. However, you could see during those first initial days, because you have more food content or more food volume essentially, and you have more gut residue, you're seeing an increase in scale weight because that's just literally material in your stomach that has yet to be passed through. Another huge factor that influences scale weight is the menstrual cycle for our females out there. And so experiencing fluid retention is very common at certain points throughout the cycle. And generally, what we see is weight will go up right before ovulation due to the increase in estrogen, which causes sodium retention. And also, women will generally have the highest water retention in week 4 during the late luteal phase, due to PMS. And last but not least, we have 3 other factors that influence our scale weight. So you guys see there's like a multitude. There's 10 plus here that could really influence your scale weight. And keep in mind that these aren't in isolation. These aren't in all separate buckets. Like you could have 3 out of the 10, you could have 5 out of the 10, you could have 10 out of 10, if you're really in a precarious position. But when it comes down to it, there's 3 more factors that can influence our scale weight, and that is the time you eat. So, if you're eating late at night before your usual early morning weigh-in, it's generally going to increase your scale weight. So if you're generally used to eating your last meal at say 6 p.m., however, you had a late night, you got home late from work, and now you eat at 9, 10 o'clock, and you generally weigh in at 5 o'clock in the morning, it could shift your scale weight. Another huge thing is lack of sleep, which can increase cortisol production, which can increase water retention. And then last but not least, we got to consider our bowel movements. So this is why you'll generally see your scale weight higher if you haven't gone to the bathroom before your weigh-in, or if you're someone that's dealing with digestive issues or you're dealing with constipation. We're going to see that you're going to be retaining, you're going to have a higher scale weight, but it's just because you haven't evacuated your bowels essentially. So all of these factors and the high likelihood of seeing fluctuations in scale weight that are not indicative of fat gain. So I really want you guys to realize these are all factors that didn't impact your state of energy balance. It didn't, if you're in a deficit, you're still at the deficit. You're still consistent with your tracking, with your maintenance of your current calorie intake. You're hitting everything on the nail on the head. However, these are all things that are not indicative of fat gain. However, they are factors that can throw off our scale weight fluctuations, which is why I encourage clients to take their scale weight daily so we can use a daily average to assess the trends over time and get a more accurate measure of their true weight rather than relying on one day's potentially unreliable reading. And that's a big mistake I see people making where, they're scared of the scale or they just don't want to weigh in, and they do it on such an infrequent basis that they get really incorrect data. And the data they do get doesn't give them any indication of whether they're headed in the right direction or not.
Do you think that what is some of the research on the benefits of more frequent and consistent weigh-ins? Like, what do you think comes of that if people really stay with it consistently? Is there research that supports doing this?
100%. So let me just be honest. Scale weight is not, we have to be honest about it. It's not a perfect nor completely objective tool, but it can be used as a method of accountability and can be used as a tracker or marker of data. And the majority of research that we do have shows a positive relationship between more frequent weigh-ins and better and more successful weight loss results. And essentially, what the data suggests is that weighing yourself daily leads to better weight loss outcomes as compared to weighing yourself weekly. And this is because daily weigh ins allow you to receive a piece of data about your body and the trajectory and direction you're headed in every day, which can help you course correct if need be. So, in the literature, we see benefits of more frequent weigh ins, such as more success in weight loss attempts. We see increased awareness. We see more accurate data, especially from a daily basis perspective. We see a better ability to track and interpret trends in that data. And we also see there's actually specific studies that actually look at daily weigh-ins, or what they call self-monitoring, as a form of exposure therapy that desensitizes you to the scale. And we also see in research that more frequent self-monitoring through weigh-ins leads to greater weight loss and better weight loss maintenance. We also see that more frequent self-monitoring leads to a better understanding of the relationship between calorie intake and weight. So weighing in regularly can serve as a reminder of when you've overeaten. And studies have found that when looking at people who self weigh and self monitor themselves regularly, they also engage in other healthy, habits and behaviors more regularly. So we see this consistent, like these are trends and patterns, like success leaves clues in terms of your habits, your behaviors, like the things you engage in on a frequent basis. So, for example, there's a 2007 study which looked at consistent self monitoring of weight, a key component of successful weight loss maintenance. And it found that more frequent weigh-ins was associated with lower BMI, lower weight, and also higher scores on disinhibition and cognitive restraint. So weight gain at the 1 year follow-up was significantly greater for participants whose self-weighing frequency decreased between their baseline and 1 year. So they had people on a weight loss program, and what they essentially did was they had them weigh in every single day. Well, they saw that weight gain in the 1 year follow-up after the diet ended was significantly greater in those who decreased their weigh-in frequency from every single day to less than that, compared to those whose frequency increased or remained the same. So if they kept at the same baseline that they were utilizing during the diet intervention, they maintained more of that weight loss. And participants who decreased their frequency of self-weighing were more likely to report increases in the percentage of calorie intake from fat and in disinhibition and decreases in cognitive restraint. And keep in mind, like sometimes you hear the word restraint, but restraint is actually one of the key indicators of success in weight loss, because we have to have some aspect of restraint in terms of our ability to get to our goals. And so when we look at changes in self-weighing frequency, it was actually independently associated with weight change, which led this researchers to suggest that consistent self-weighing may help individuals maintain their successful weight loss by allowing them to catch weight gains before they escalate and make behavior changes to prevent additional weight gain. While change in self-weighing frequency is a marker for changes in other parameters of weight control, decreasing self-weighing frequency is also independently associated with greater weight gain. So to round this podcast out, I think it's important to realize that most of us can attain our body composition goals without using some tracking or quantification metrics, like weighing ourselves, measuring out our food portions, tracking our calories and macros, or even on the training side, like tracking your training, logging it, following a program. Because trying to attain noticeable physique progress, whether that be losing fat or gaining muscle, isn't optimized through intuitive methods and approaches that don't track any data. And so if losing fat and keeping it off was as easy as was such an easy objective that could be achieved intuitively without any of these metrics, we wouldn't have an obesity epidemic, nor would we see such a high post diet weight regain statistic where up to 95% of individuals regain all the fat that they lost after completing the diet. And for those trying to gain muscle, being in a surplus on a consistent basis and gauging muscle gain is a tedious process, especially if you're not tracking both your body weight and your food in any manner. So when it comes down to it, the longer that you track things like your scale weight, the more acclimated you get to it and the less mental space it'll take up. So I hope that this podcast and the information that we provided so far have helps you to detach yourself from looking at your scale weight as something that you look at in this like black or white perspective or manner. where you either succeed or fail on a daily basis, and instead use it as a piece of data that you track and compare over weeks and months, not days, and really utilize it for what it's best used for. Utilize it to your advantage rather than to your disadvantage. And so, really, when it comes down to it, it's really about shifting our mindset on looking at the scale as a piece of data, and that's it, just like we would with many other aspects of our life.
Yeah, and I want to bring this up because I'm currently in that hell with me competing. I'm a little over 2 weeks out. I'm sitting about 170, so I'm about 4 pounds over scale weight. And the original idea was I thought I was going to be able to get to lightweight. But since my back has been getting healed up and I've been getting all my mobility back by working with Jason Coley and some stuff and doing my chiropractic, my legs have started regrowing again. And so as you're looking at my pictures weekly, I'm just getting harder and denser. It's because I'm able to train the way I used to, because I have stabilization again. And the last time I was 154 was 2018, where I had to die to get those 5 pounds off me in the last week, and my physique didn't pay off. I say that because I have to objectively look at it and go, dude, I've worked out for like 5 years. Obviously, I put some weight on, when I look at my body. And if I hadn't been watching my scale and tracking it since 2013, when I first linked up with Scoob, I would never have been able to see the pieces to the puzzle and thought that it still should be arbitrarily chasing this weight class number that might not be a benefit to me. So
Mhm.
I think when you're looking at the scale over a long period of time, you can kind of understand where you're going and what your pictures are saying. But it takes a little bit more time than just the daily emotional whims of gaining 3 pounds or losing 3 pounds. If you're the person who needs a daily win like that, then albeit have a great one. But I think that most people, if they looked at the 90-day wins with their scale in terms of how they look, how they feel, I think they'd probably get a better product long term, and probably more enjoyment out of the process, in all honesty.
100%, my man. I'm really glad you hit on that because actually, this is a conversation I quite frequently have with clients, especially my females that kind of come to me with this very targeted target. So by that I mean that they want to be 130 pounds or they want to be back to the weight that they were in high school or college. And oftentimes we get into the conversation, I really start digging in more. Why do you want that weight? What did you feel like at that weight? What do you want to feel like? What was your lifestyle like? And we go through all these intrinsic drivers and these motivating factors, and sometimes I realize it's more of an attachment just to that number and what they think it's going to present them with. And then I follow up and I really dig into another aspect from a psychological aspect. And I ask them, listen, you have these goals and you're talking about your weight, but let's talk about your body composition. What do you want to feel like? What do you want to look like? What do you want to see when you look in the mirror? And sometimes for some females, it's gaining more muscle, losing more body fat, toning, certain areas of their body, getting, greater glute gains, they want a bigger booty, whatever it may be. We get really specific about those body composition results. And then I also want to, go through them or go with them through what do you want to feel like? You want to be stronger in the gym. You want to be more capable for your kids or more active for your kids and able to do things with them for a long time course. And then you also want your husband to look at you and really be attracted to you. And we go through all these other goals besides the scale weight. And then I ask them, listen, so you're at 160 pounds and your goal was 130 pounds. But if I could give you that at 145 pounds, that look, that feeling, that function, that performance, would you take it? Or would you just say, let's disregard the look. Let's just go for that chasing the scale weight. And they always pick that 145 pounds where they look and
Yep.
feel their best. And so really when it comes down to it, guys, realize that the scale weight is just a number. It is something that we can use to track and assess progress over time, but it's not about pinpointing a specific number and looking at it as bullseye or bust, fail, pass or fail. It's about really looking at this as a journey and getting to the best version of yourself. And that best version of yourself should not be and will not be defined by weight. Because if that's all you're targeting, I will tell you that I've worked with so many clients that have come to me after those type of journeys where they've went through these drastic, extreme diets and crash diets to get to a certain weight. That's all their focus has been. And they've lost weight, don't get me wrong, but they also lost muscle in the process. And when they get to that target weight, that goal weight that they had, they didn't have the look that they wanted. They, whether it be a male that is too skinny, he thought he was going to look like, a fitness model. However, now he's like just skinny and doesn't have enough muscle mass, or it's a female that realizes that she did not have the shape of the girl that she saw on Instagram, the influencer that was that 125 or 130 pounds. So really when it comes down to it, let's focus on body composition improvement and really utilizing all these tools in our disposal for what they're best for, but not getting so fixated on just a number and rather utilizing the trends over time to see progression within the program that you're following.
I think the take home message I can say here is Keep making sure you stay in love with the pursuit of health and fitness that got you into it in the first place. There are far too many people that tie themselves up into the nuances that it makes it unenjoyable. And if what was got you into it was taking care of yourself, always remember that. And there always comes crossroads that you have to make changes. But for the most part, you do some good shit when you just remember, keep having fun. Most importantly, if you're not, figure out how to change it. But
100%.
yeah, cool. Dude, where can everybody find you at?
Guys, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at BrandonCruz underscore or on my email, which is btacruzfitness@gmail.com. Please remember, like, comment, subscribe, share the show. We always love that. We love interacting with you guys and let us know any questions that you have. This show is really catered towards our clients and then the followers of the show, the subscribers, and those that listen to us. So we appreciate your consistent support and feedback. And we look forward to coming back to you guys every single Friday from here till the end of time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Guys, Jeff Unbreakable Black, Instagram, I'm on YouTube, Relentless Forever. I just did a day in the life video of me training. What's it like to train with brittle bone disease? I'm doing legs this Saturday, so I'm going to show you guys the lift I have to put in my shoe that I wear that compensates the 1 inch difference between my legs and kind of go over stuff. You guys get to see how I train on a leg day that is different than what most people might do for their leg day. So it'll be interesting to see. I've never really felt comfortable shooting my leg workouts because there's always been that judgment there of like, fuck, I don't do enough weight. These guys are like hack squatting like 4 and 5 plates, and I'm like, I got a plate on there, yay! But I'm also coming back from a back injury, so it's kind of like still cool. I figured to show it off and show the real truth of when you come back from injuries, it's really starting back over. So anyway, dude, it was great catching up with you as always.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Peace, everyone.
Peace.